The rain fell hard on the broken walls of Outpost 7. Sergeant Marcus Cole sat behind a pile of rubble, his old rifle resting across his knees. He was 63 years old and his bones ached from the cold and the years of fighting, but he would not leave this place. The Vexari had come to Earth 3 years ago. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, and they had weapons that could burn through metal like paper. Most of humanity had fallen in the first months. Cities became dust. Armies became memories. The Vexari thought Earth would be easy to take, just another world to add to their empire of conquered planets. They were wrong about one thing: humans did not know how to give up. Marcus looked at the small group around him. There were only 12 defenders left at Outpost 7. Some were soldiers like him, veterans who had fought in wars before the aliens came. Others were civilians who had picked up weapons when their families died. A young woman named Alina, barely 20 years old, was checking her ammunition. She had been a university student before the invasion. Now she was one of the best fighters Marcus had ever seen. The outpost sat on a hill in what used to be Eastern Europe. It was not a pretty place. The buildings were half destroyed, the walls cracked and burned. But it controlled the only road through the mountains, and as long as they held it, the Vexari could not move their heavy equipment into the valley beyond. Thousands of refugees lived in that valley, hidden in caves and old mines. Marcus had promised those people he would hold the outpost. He meant to keep that promise. A young man named David crawled up beside him. David had been a teacher before the war, and he still wore glasses that were cracked on one side. He was smart, good with technology, and he had figured out how to use the Vexari communication devices they had captured. "I intercepted their signals again," David said. His voice was quiet. "They're bringing more troops, at least 300. They'll attack at dawn." Marcus nodded slowly. 12 against 300. The numbers did not matter anymore. Numbers had stopped mattering a long time ago. "How long until dawn?" Marcus asked. 4 hours. Marcus looked at his small group. They were tired. Some were wounded, but not one of them talked about running. That was the thing about humans that the Vexari never understood. When humans decided to stand for something, they stood until the end. "Get everyone together," Marcus said. "I want to talk to them." David nodded and moved away through the rubble. Marcus stood up slowly, his knees cracking. He walked to the center of the outpost, where a small fire burned under a metal roof. The flames gave little warmth, but the light was enough to see the faces of his people as they gathered. There was Alina with her sharp eyes and steady hands. There was Thomas, a big man who had been a factory worker and now carried a heavy machine gun like it weighed nothing. There was Maria, a doctor who had saved more lives than anyone could count, even while the world fell apart around her. There were the others too, each with their own story, each with their own reasons for being here. Marcus looked at them all. He saw fear in some eyes, but more than fear, he saw determination. "You all know what's coming," Marcus said. His voice was rough but clear. 300 Vexari, maybe more. They want this outpost because they want the valley. They want the people hiding there. No one spoke. The fire crackled softly. "I won't lie to you. We probably won't survive tomorrow, but that's not what matters." Marcus paused, searching for the right words. "What matters is that we show them what humans are made of. We show them that taking our world isn't free. Every outpost they attack costs them soldiers. Every hill we defend makes them bleed. And maybe, just maybe, one day they'll decide we're too much trouble." Thomas spoke up, his deep voice rumbling. "I didn't come here to die, Sergeant. I came here to make them die." A few people laughed at that. It was a grim laugh, but it was real. "That's the spirit," Marcus said. "We hit them hard. We make them pay for every meter of ground, and if we fall standing up. That's all any soldier can ask for." Alina stepped forward. "The people in the valley are listening, you know. David set up a broadcast system. They can hear everything we say on the radio." Marcus hadn't known that. He thought about the thousands of people hiding in those caves, listening to this small group of fighters prepare for what might be their last battle. "Good," he said. "Let them hear. Let them know that someone is fighting for them. That's important. Hope is important." Maria the doctor spoke quietly. "My daughter is in that valley. She's only 8 years old. She thinks her mother is a hero." Her voice shook slightly. "I need to be worth that belief." Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "You already are. We all are. Not because we're going to win, but because we're going to try." The hours passed slowly. They prepared their defenses as best they could. They set up positions behind walls and in ruined buildings. They placed their few explosives where they would do the most damage. They checked their weapons and shared their last ammunition. Marcus walked the perimeter, checking on each person. He had done this 1,000 times in his life, in a dozen different wars on Earth before the Vexari came. He had never expected to be fighting aliens, but fighting was fighting. The fear was the same. The courage was the same. As the sky began to lighten, Marcus found Alina at the forward position. She was watching the road that led up to the outpost, her rifle ready. "You ever think about what life would be like if they hadn't come?" she asked. Marcus thought about it. He had been retired before the invasion, living in a small house by a lake. He had been planning to spend his final years fishing and reading books. "Sometimes," he said, "but thinking about that doesn't help. We deal with the world we have, not the world we want." Alina nodded. "My parents died in the first attack. I was angry for a long time. Now I'm just focused. I want to hurt them as much as they hurt us." "That's natural," Marcus said, "but don't let anger make you stupid. Stay smart, stay alive as long as you can, and make every shot count." The first light of dawn touched the eastern sky. In the distance, Marcus could see movement. The Vexari were coming. "This is it," he said. He activated his radio so everyone could hear. "All positions, the enemy is approaching. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who's counting on us." He looked at Alina one more time. She was scared, he could see that, but she was also ready. "For Earth," Marcus said. "For Earth," Alina repeated. Down in the valley, thousands of people huddled around their radios, listening to the static and the voices of the 12 defenders who stood between them and death. Among them was a young man named Alexei, who had been a soldier once, before he lost his leg in the first months of the war. He listened to Marcus Cole's words, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt shame, shame that he was hiding while others fought, shame that he had given up. And beneath the shame, something else was growing, something like fire. The battle for Outpost 7 was about to begin, and though no one knew it yet, it would change everything. The Vexari came up the road in their dark armor, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. There were so many of them that they filled the road like a river of gray metal. Their commander was a tall creature named Vorath, and he had conquered 17 worlds before Earth. To him, this outpost was nothing. These humans were nothing. He expected to sweep them aside in minutes. The first explosion changed his mind. Thomas had planted their strongest charge under the road. When the Vexari front line reached the marker, he pressed the button. The ground erupted in fire and stone, and 24 aliens disappeared in an instant. For a moment there was silence, then the firing began. Marcus aimed carefully and squeezed his trigger. A Vexari soldier fell. Beside him, Alina was firing in controlled bursts, each shot finding its target. Around the outpost, the other defenders were doing the same. The Vexari returned fire. Energy beams scorched the air, blasting chunks of stone from the walls. One of the defenders, a man named Peter, was hit in the chest. He fell without a sound. "Hold the line," Marcus shouted. "Make them work for it." The battle raged on as the sun rose higher. The Vexari pushed forward, but every meter cost them soldiers. The humans fought like demons, like creatures possessed by something the aliens did not understand. By mid-morning, the outpost was still holding. Down in the valley, Alexei stood up on his one good leg. "Give me a weapon," he said to the people around him. "I'm going to help them." They told him he was crazy. They told him he would die. He didn't care anymore. If 12 people could fight 300, then he could fight too. He wasn't the only one. All across the valley, people were standing up. People who had given up, people who had been hiding, people who had forgotten what it meant to resist. Marcus Cole and his 12 defenders had reminded them. And now the resistance was growing. At Outpost 7, Marcus didn't know any of this. He only knew that his people were dying and that the Vexari kept coming. Alina had been hit in the arm but was still fighting. Thomas's machine gun had jammed, but he had picked up a rifle and kept shooting. Maria was dragging wounded fighters to cover, patching them up, and sending them back to fight. They had held for 5 hours. It was more than Marcus had expected. Then the Vexari brought up their heavy weapons. Marcus saw the big gun being positioned on the road below. It was a siege cannon, capable of destroying the entire outpost in one shot. He knew what that meant. "Fall back to the inner building," he ordered. "Everyone move." The survivors scrambled for cover just as the cannon fired. The outer wall of the outpost exploded into dust and fire. Marcus felt himself thrown through the air. He hit the ground hard and tasted blood. For a long moment he couldn't move. His ears were ringing. His vision was blurred. But through the smoke and chaos he could see the inner building still standing. And he could see his people still fighting. Somehow Marcus got to his feet. His rifle was gone, lost in the explosion. He pulled his pistol from his belt instead. It was an old weapon, nothing special, but it would have to do. They want us dead, he said to himself. They're going to have to come up here and do it themselves. The Vixari began their final assault. They climbed over the rubble of the outer wall, hundreds of them, confident that the battle was over. They didn't know that the battle was just beginning. In the valley below, Alexei and 50 other volunteers were climbing the mountain path toward the outpost. They had whatever weapons they could find, farming tools, hunting rifles, and a few captured alien guns. They were not soldiers. Most of them had never killed anyone. But they were human, and they were angry, and they were coming to help. The true battle for Earth was about to begin. Voreth, the Vixari commander, climbed over the destroyed outer wall of the outpost with his personal guard. He was frustrated. This small group of humans had held his army for 5 hours. 5 hours. It was an embarrassment. His superiors would question his competence. They would say he had been soft, that he had underestimated the humans. He would not make that mistake again. Through the smoke and dust, he could see the inner building. It was a small structure, barely more than a bunker. The remaining humans had retreated there. His soldiers surrounded it, waiting for his command. "Burn it down," Voreth ordered. "Kill them all." Before his soldiers could move, a shot rang out. One of his guards fell dead. Voreth spun around, raising his weapon. On the roof of the inner building, Marcus Cole stood with his pistol. His face was bloody, his uniform torn, but his eyes were clear and steady. "You want this outpost," Marcus shouted. "Come and take it yourself." Voreth felt something he rarely felt. It was not quite fear, but it was close. This human should be dead. He should have given up hours ago. Instead, he stood there challenging the commander of an army. "Foolish creature," Voreth said. "You are already defeated. Why do you keep fighting?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because that's what we do. We fight. We keep fighting until there's nothing left, and sometimes, just sometimes, we win." "You cannot win. You are one man against hundreds." "Am I?" At that moment, Voreth heard something that made his blood run cold. It was a sound he had heard on a dozen worlds, a sound that meant trouble. It was the sound of voices, many voices, shouting together. He turned to look down the mountain. What he saw made him freeze. Hundreds of humans were climbing up toward the outpost. They came from the valley, from the caves, from the hiding places. They carried weapons of all kinds, and they were shouting words he did not understand. For Earth, for humanity, for the 12. Alexei led them, limping on his bad leg but moving as fast as anyone else. Behind him came farmers and teachers, doctors and mechanics, old people and young people, everyone who had hidden in the valley and listened to the broadcast of the battle. They had heard Marcus Cole and his defenders fight for 5 hours. They had heard them refuse to give up, and something had changed inside them. The resistance had begun. Voreth screamed orders to his soldiers. They turned to face this new threat, but they were caught between two groups now. The defenders in the building were still fighting, picking off soldiers one by one, and the crowd from the valley was growing larger every minute. Marcus watched from the roof as the tide of battle changed. He could not believe what he was seeing. These were not soldiers. These were ordinary people, the kind of people he had spent his whole life protecting, and now they were protecting him. "Hold the building," he shouted to his remaining defenders. "Help is coming." Inside the bunker, Elena heard him. She was down to her last magazine, her arm throbbing with pain, but she kept firing. Beside her, Thomas had found a metal bar and was using it as a weapon, swinging it at any Vixari who came through the door. Maria was still tending to the wounded. There were only 6 defenders left now, but they were all fighting. None of them had given up. Outside, the battle became chaos. The volunteers from the valley crashed into the Vixari rear line like a wave hitting a beach. They were not trained fighters, but they were determined, and they were many. For everyone who fell, 2 more took their place. Alexei found himself face to face with a Vixari soldier. The alien was bigger, stronger, and had better weapons. Alexei had only a hunting knife. He attacked anyway. The Vixari was surprised by his ferocity. It expected fear, submission. Instead, it got a blade in its throat. The alien fell, and Alexei took its weapon. "This is how we fight," he screamed to those around him. "This is how we win." The people heard him. They fought harder. Voreth realized his army was in trouble. He had expected a quick victory, but now he was losing soldiers faster than he could count. These humans were everywhere, fighting with whatever they had, refusing to die. He made a decision. He would retreat, regroup, and call for reinforcements. This outpost was not worth the lives it was costing. He began to give the order, but he never finished. Marcus had climbed down from the roof and was working his way through the chaos. He had one goal: reach the enemy commander. He had seen Vorath giving orders, and he knew that if he could kill the leader, the Vexari might break. It was a long shot. Everything about this day had been a long shot. Marcus pushed through the fighting, using his pistol when he had to, his fists when he didn't. He was old and tired and hurt, but he had been a soldier for 40 years. He knew how to fight. Finally, he reached Vorath. The Vexari commander saw him coming and raised his weapon. "Human," Vorath said, "you are persistent, I will give you that." "We have a saying on Earth," Marcus replied. "It's not over until it's over." Vorath fired. The energy beam caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to his knees, his pistol falling from his hand. For a moment, it seemed like everything was finished. Then Marcus looked up. His eyes met Vorath's, and he smiled. "Look behind you," he said. Vorath turned. Elena was there, her rifle aimed at his head. Behind her was Thomas and Maria and the other survivors from the bunker, and behind them were hundreds of volunteers from the valley. The Vexari soldiers were surrounded. "Your army is beaten," Marcus said, struggling to his feet. "Your soldiers are dying, and more humans are coming. Every minute, every hour, more will come. Because that's what we do, we don't give up, we never give up." Vorath looked around at the chaos. His army was indeed beaten. The humans had won this battle against all odds. It should have been impossible. "This changes nothing," he said. "More Vexari will come. We will burn your planet to ash." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but not today. Today we win." Elena stepped forward and put her rifle to Vorath's head. "What should we do with him, Sergeant?" Marcus thought about it. This creature had killed thousands of humans. He deserved death many times over. But Marcus was a soldier, not a murderer, and there was more value in a captured commander than a dead one. "Take him prisoner," Marcus said. "We might need him later." The volunteers from the valley cheered. They had won. It was a small victory, just one outpost on one mountain, but it was a victory nonetheless. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, the story of Outpost 7 was being told in every hiding place, every cave, every basement where humans still survived. 12 defenders had held against 300. A wounded veteran had inspired thousands to fight back. The Vexari could be beaten. In the valley, people gathered around their radios, listening to the reports. They heard about Marcus Cole, who had fought with a pistol and a smile. They heard about Elena, who had captured the enemy commander. They heard about Thomas and Maria and all the others who had stood and fought. And they heard about the volunteers who had climbed the mountain to help. Ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. The resistance was no longer a dream, it was real. Alexei sat beside a fire, cleaning his captured alien weapon. His leg hurt more than ever, but he didn't care. He had fought today. He had made a difference. A young woman sat down beside him. She introduced herself as Katia, a former engineer. "What happens now?" she asked. Alexei looked at the fire. "Now we organize, we plan. We hit them again and again until they leave our planet." "Can we really win?" Alexei thought about Marcus Cole, standing bloody and defiant on that roof. He thought about the 12 defenders who had held the outpost against impossible odds. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we can fight, and as long as we fight, there's hope." On the outpost hill, Marcus sat against a wall while Maria bandaged his shoulder. The wound was bad, but he would live. He was too stubborn to die. "You did something special today," Maria said. "You know that, right?" Marcus shook his head. "I didn't do anything. They did." He gestured at the people around them, the volunteers who were now cleaning up the battlefield, tending to the wounded, celebrating their victory. "I just reminded them what they already had inside them." Elena came over and sat down. She looked exhausted, but also alive in a way she hadn't been before. "The word is spreading," she said. "Other groups are contacting us. There are resistance cells all over the continent. They all want to know how we did it." "We believed," Marcus said simply. "We believed in ourselves and in each other. The Vexari have bigger armies and better weapons, but they don't have what we have." "What's that?" Marcus looked at the humans around him, at the impossible victory they had won together. "Heart," he said. "Stubbornness, the refusal to accept defeat. Call it whatever you want, but it's the most powerful weapon in the universe, and the Vexari don't have it." High above, in orbit around Earth, the Vexari fleet received word of what had happened at Outpost 7. The admirals were confused. How had such a small group of humans defeated a force that should have crushed them easily? They decided to send more troops, many more. They would show these humans the futility of resistance. But in the darkness of space, watching the fleet prepare, one young Vexari officer named Calix felt doubt for the first time in his life. He had studied the battle reports. He had seen the footage of humans fighting with knives against plasma rifles. There was something wrong with these creatures, something his people did not understand. And if they did not understand it, how could they defeat it? The war for Earth was just beginning. The Vexari had the numbers and the technology. The humans had something else. They had hope. And that would make all the difference. In a small room in the basement of the outpost, Marcus Cole finally allowed himself to sleep. For the first time in 3 years, he dreamed of peace. But he knew, even in his dreams, that the fight was far from over. It was only beginning. And he was ready. The weeks after the Battle of Outpost 7 changed everything. Marcus Cole became a name that every human knew, a symbol of what was possible when ordinary people refused to surrender. The story spread across the planet through hidden radio signals, handwritten messages, and whispered conversations. In refugee camps and ruined cities, people repeated the tale of 12 defenders who had held against 300. But Marcus himself had no time for fame. He was too busy building an army. The outpost had become the center of the resistance. Every day, new volunteers arrived from the valleys and mountains. They came with whatever weapons they could find, and they came ready to fight. Marcus organized them into units, trained them in basic tactics, and sent them out to strike at Vexari positions across the region. Alina became his second in command. Her wound had healed, and she had proven herself to be a natural leader. The volunteers respected her because she fought beside them, never asking them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. Thomas commanded the heavy weapons group, teaching farmers how to use captured Vexari guns. Maria ran the medical station, training others in battlefield medicine. David handled communications, intercepting enemy signals and coordinating with other resistance cells. Alexei proved to be a valuable addition. Despite his missing leg, he had a tactical mind that impressed even Marcus. He planned raids that hit the enemy hard and fast, then disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. 1 month after the battle, the resistance controlled the entire mountain region. The Vexari had tried twice to retake it, and twice they had failed. Each failure made the humans stronger and the aliens more frustrated. In orbit, the Vexari High Command was becoming concerned. Earth should have been conquered quickly, like all the other worlds. Instead, the invasion was turning into a disaster. They had lost more soldiers on Earth than on any planet they had ever conquered. Fleet Admiral Zorax called a meeting of his commanders. He was an old warrior with scars from 100 battles, and he did not understand what was happening. "Explain this to me," he demanded. "How are primitive creatures with crude weapons defeating our armies?" None of the commanders had a good answer. They offered excuses. The terrain was difficult, the weather was harsh, the human population was larger than expected. Zorax cut them off. "I do not want excuses, I want solutions." One commander, a younger officer named Vaxon, spoke up. "Perhaps we should try a different approach, Admiral. Instead of fighting them directly, we could negotiate." The other commanders stared at him in shock. Negotiate? With conquered species, it was unthinkable. "The humans have shown they will fight to the death," Vaxon continued. "Every battle costs us more soldiers. Perhaps if we offered them some terms, some level of self-governance, they would stop resisting." Zorax considered this. He had conquered 17 worlds, and he had never negotiated with any of them, but none of them had fought like the humans. "No," he said finally. "If we negotiate, we show weakness. Other conquered worlds might get ideas. We will send more troops. We will crush this resistance and make an example of everyone involved." Vaxon nodded and said nothing more. But inside, he wondered if the Admiral was making a terrible mistake. Back on Earth, Marcus received intelligence about the coming Vexari reinforcements. 3 new divisions were being sent down from orbit. They would attack the mountain region from 3 directions at once, overwhelming the resistance with sheer numbers. He gathered his commanders for a war council. "We can't hold them here," Alexei said, studying the maps. "They have too many soldiers. If they attack from all 3 directions, we'll be surrounded." "Then we don't let them attack," Alina said. "We hit them before they can organize, disrupt their plans." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's part of it, but we need more. We need to spread the fight across the whole planet, make them chase us everywhere." He looked at the faces around him. These people had come so far in such a short time. A month ago, most of them had been hiding in caves. Now they were planning military operations against an alien army. "I want to send messengers to every resistance cell we can contact," Marcus said. "Tell them to start hitting Vexari positions on the same day. Not big attacks, just enough to cause chaos. If the enemy has to defend everywhere, they can't concentrate their forces against us." "It's risky," David said. "Many of those cells are small and poorly armed. They could be wiped out." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why we give them a choice. Anyone who doesn't want to participate can stay hidden, but I think many of them will fight. They're just waiting for someone to give them a reason." The message went out that night, broadcast in code across 100 frequencies. It was simple. On the 5th day of the new month, strike. Hit any Vexari target you can reach. Show them that the resistance is everywhere. The responses came back over the following days. Cell after cell confirmed their participation. Some were large groups with hundreds of fighters. Others were tiny bands of survivors who had been waiting in the shadows for years. All of them were ready. Marcus was amazed by the scale of it. He had known there were other resistance groups, but he hadn't realized how many. The invasion had driven humans underground, but it hadn't destroyed them. They had been waiting, preserving their strength, hopping for a moment like this. The Vexari had made a critical error. They had thought the humans were beaten because they couldn't see them fighting. They didn't understand that humans knew how to be patient, how to wait for the right moment. That moment had arrived. The 5th day came with rain and thunder. Across the planet, thousands of humans emerged from their hiding places. In what used to be North America, a group of former soldiers attacked a Vexari supply depot, destroying fuel and ammunition that the enemy badly needed. In South America, resistance fighters ambushed a convoy and captured a senior Vexari officer. In Africa, villagers who had hidden in the jungle for 3 years came out and destroyed a communication tower. In Asia, hackers penetrated the Vexari command network and filled it with false reports and confusion. And in the mountain region, Marcus Cole led the largest attack yet. The Vexari reinforcements were still organizing when the humans struck. Elena led a team that hit their left flank, drawing defenders away from the center. Alexei's group attacked the supply lines, preventing the enemy from bringing up heavy weapons. Thomas's unit provided covering fire from the high ground, pinning down enemy soldiers who tried to advance. Marcus himself led the main assault. At 63, he was too old for this kind of fighting. His shoulder still hurt from his wound. His legs ached with every step, but he was at the front anyway, rifle in his hands, showing his people what courage looked like. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vexari reinforcements had been scattered, and their commander was dead. The humans had suffered losses too, but they had won again. That evening, Marcus sat on a rock overlooking the battlefield. Smoke still rose from burning enemy vehicles. Around him, his fighters were celebrating, laughing and crying and hugging each other. Elena came and sat beside him. "Reports are coming in from all over the world," she said. "The attacks were successful almost everywhere. The Vexari are in chaos." Marcus nodded, but he didn't smile. "This is just the beginning. They'll hit back hard. They have to, or they lose face. The next few months are going to be brutal." "I know," Elena said, "but we've proven something today. We can fight them. We can win." "That was never in doubt," Marcus said. "What I worried about was whether we would fight, whether people would stop being afraid and start resisting." He looked at the celebrations around him. "I don't worry about that anymore." In orbit, Admiral Zorax received the reports with growing fury. The humans had struck everywhere simultaneously. His forces were taking casualties across the entire planet. It was coordinated, organized resistance on a scale he had never faced. "Find the leaders," he ordered. "Find them and kill them. This Marcus Cole, this Elena, all of them. Cut off the head and the body will die." His commanders rushed to obey. But even as they worked, the young officer Vaxon was thinking about something else. He had studied the battle reports carefully, and he had noticed something that worried him. The humans weren't just fighting well. They were learning. Every battle taught them new tactics, new ways to exploit Vexari weaknesses. They were adapting faster than any species he had ever seen. And they were still getting stronger. Vaxon pulled up the population estimates for Earth. Before the invasion, there had been 8 billion humans. The Vexari had killed perhaps 2 billion in the initial conquest. That left 6 billion, hiding in every corner of the planet. 6 billion potential fighters. For the first time, Vaxon understood something that his admiral did not. The Vexari might have started this war, but they might not be able to finish it. Not the way they wanted to. The night of the great attack, Marcus received a message from a resistance cell he had never heard of. They were in what used to be Australia, and they had something important to share. They had captured a Vexari warship. Not destroyed it, captured it, intact and functional. The war had just changed again. The captured Vexari warship was called the Devourer. It was a medium-class cruiser, capable of atmospheric flight and orbital operations. The resistance cell in Australia had taken it through an audacious plan. They had infiltrated the crew as human slaves, then risen up during a maintenance cycle when most of the Vexari officers were off the ship. Marcus traveled to Australia to see it himself. The journey took 2 weeks, moving through underground networks and hidden passages that the resistance had created over years of hiding. When he finally reached the hidden base where the ship was kept, he was amazed. The Devourer sat in a deep canyon, covered with camouflage netting. It was ugly by human standards, all sharp angles and dark metal, but it represented something that humans had never had before, a way to fight back in space. The leader of the Australian cell was a woman named Sarah Chen. She had been an aerospace engineer before the invasion, and she had spent 3 years learning everything she could about Vexari technology. "The ship is operational," she told Marcus. "We've figured out most of the controls, the weapons systems, the engines, everything. What we don't have is pilots." "Pilots?" Sarah nodded. "The Vexari fly their ships using a neural interface. We can bypass it, but we need people with strong minds who can handle the stress. Most of the people we've tried either can't make the connection or burn out after a few minutes." Marcus thought about this. "How many pilots do you need?" "For a ship this size, at least 12. We have 3 who can manage it. We need 9 more." Marcus began sending messages to the other resistance cells. He asked for volunteers, people who had piloted aircraft or spacecraft before the invasion. Within a month, he had found 50 candidates. They came to Australia from all over the world. Marcus watched them arrive. Former Air Force pilots, commercial aviators, even a few astronauts who had survived the initial attacks. They were tested one by one on the neural interface. Most failed, some had seizures, some simply couldn't make the connection work. But slowly, Sarah found the ones who could handle it. Among the successful candidates was a young man named Victor. He had been a fighter pilot in his country's Air Force, and he adapted to the alien interface faster than anyone else. "It's strange," Victor told Marcus after his first successful test. "It's like the ship becomes part of you. You feel everything it feels. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." "Can you fight with it?" Marcus asked. Victor smiled. "I can fly circles around any Vexari ship. They trained me well, and now I'm going to use everything they taught me against them." It took 3 more months to train the full crew. During that time, the war on Earth continued. The Vexari sent more reinforcements, and the resistance fought back harder. Both sides were losing soldiers at an alarming rate. Admiral Zorax was under pressure from the Vexari High Command. They wanted to know why Earth was taking so long to conquer. They threatened to replace him if he couldn't show results. Zorax responded by ordering more brutal tactics. His soldiers began destroying human settlements without warning, killing civilians to punish resistance activity. He thought this would break the humans' will to fight. Instead, it made them angrier. Every atrocity drove more people into the resistance. Farmers who had been trying to survive quietly joined the fight after their villages were burned. City dwellers who had hidden for years came out to take revenge for lost families. Marcus watched the resistance grow with mixed feelings. Every new fighter was welcome, but every new fighter also represented a tragedy that had driven them to arms. "We're winning," Alina told him one evening. "The Vexari control less territory now than they did 6 months ago." "We're not winning," Marcus said. "We're surviving. As long as they control space, they can keep sending reinforcements forever. We can fight on the ground for 100 years and still lose. That's why the ship matters." "Yes, that's why the ship matters." Finally, the day came when the Devourer was ready for combat. The full crew was trained, the weapons were tested, and Sarah had solved the last technical problems. Marcus addressed the crew before their first mission. "You're about to do something that no humans have ever done. You're going to take the fight to the Vexari in their own element. You're going to show them that the sky doesn't belong to them anymore." Victor stood at the front of the group, wearing a flight suit adapted from Vexari materials. "What's our target?" "There's a Vexari space station in low orbit. It's their main coordination center for operations on this continent. If we destroy it, we blind them for weeks." "And after that?" Marcus smiled grimly. "After that we do it again, and again, until they have nothing left." The Devourer launched at midnight, rising from the canyon on silent engines. Sarah watched from the ground, her heart in her throat. She had given everything to make this moment possible. Victor sat in the pilot's chair, his mind linked to the ship. He could feel the engines working, the weapons charging, the vast emptiness of space calling to him. Around him, the other crew members were at their stations, nervous but ready. They rose through the atmosphere, through the clouds, through the thin air at the edge of space. And then they were in orbit, looking down at Earth for the first time. It was beautiful. Even scarred by war, even marked by the fires of invasion, it was beautiful. "There's the station," the sensor operator reported. 2 escort ships defending it. "I see them," Victor said. "Weapons ready." "Ready." "Then let's introduce ourselves." The Devourer accelerated toward the enemy. The Vexari escorts saw it and were confused. Their sensors told them it was a Vexari ship, but it wasn't responding to their communication codes. They figured it out too late. Victor fired the main weapons at maximum power. The first escort disappeared in a flash of light. The second tried to run, but Victor was faster. He brought the Devourer around and hit it from behind, destroying its engines. The ship drifted helplessly as they passed. The space station ahead was trying to raise its shields, but the crew of the Devourer had already disabled the shield generators using access codes stolen from the ship's databanks. The station was defenseless. "Fire all weapons," Victor ordered. The Devourer unleashed everything it had. Energy beams and missiles slammed into the station, tearing it apart piece by piece. Secondary explosions ripped through its structure as fuel and ammunition cooked off. Within minutes, the station was debris. In orbit around Earth, every Vexari officer who witnessed the attack was stunned. A human crew had destroyed their main coordination center. It was impossible. It was humiliating. And it was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, the Devourer struck again and again. They destroyed supply ships, shot down transport craft, and attacked other stations. The Vexari had more ships, but they were spread thin across a planet-sized occupation zone. The Devourer could strike anywhere and disappear before help arrived. Admiral Zorax became obsessed with finding and destroying the human ship. He sent his best hunters after it. He set traps. He offered rewards to any soldier who could bring him information. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, on the ground, the resistance grew bolder. With the Vexari distracted by the threat from space, they faced less pressure. They expanded their operations, liberating larger areas and establishing communication networks that spanned continents. 1 year after the Battle of Outpost 7, Marcus Cole stood before a gathering of resistance leaders from around the world. They had come together for the first time, traveling through secret routes to meet in a hidden base deep underground. 1 year ago, 12 of us held a small outpost against 300 enemy soldiers, Marcus said. Today, we number in the millions. We have fighters on every continent. We have a ship that can challenge them in space. And we have something else, something more important than weapons or numbers. He paused, looking at the faces before him. They were people of every background, every nationality, every age. The invasion had erased the divisions that once separated humans. Now they were simply humanity, united against a common enemy. "We have hope," Marcus said. "Not blind hope, not naive hope, but real hope based on what we've proven we can do. The Vexari thought they could break us. They were wrong. Every time they knocked us down, we got back up. Every time they thought we were defeated, we surprised them. And we're going to keep surprising them until they leave our planet." A cheer rose from the assembled leaders. It was a sound that would have been impossible a year ago when humanity seemed doomed. Now it was a promise. The war for Earth was far from over, but for the first time, humans were not just surviving. They were winning. And somewhere in orbit, watching the reports of his failing invasion, Admiral Zorax began to understand what his young officer Vaxon had known for months. The Vexari had made a terrible mistake coming to Earth. And now they were going to pay for it. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Outpost 7. The world had changed beyond recognition. The Resistance now controlled nearly 40% of Earth's surface. They had liberated cities, rebuilt communication networks, and established governments in free territories. The Vexari still held the rest, but their grip was weakening every day. Marcus Cole stood at the window of the Resistance headquarters, looking out at a city that had been dead when he first arrived and was now alive with activity. People walked the streets openly. Children played in parks that had been rubble a year ago. It still amazed him. He was 65 now, and he felt every year. The fighting had taken its toll on his body. His shoulder never healed properly, and he walked with a limp from an injury sustained during a raid 6 months ago, but he refused to retire. "The War Council is waiting," Alina said from the doorway. She was 30 now, a full commander in her own right. The young student he had met at Outpost 7 had become one of the most respected leaders in the resistance. "Coming," Marcus said. He took one more look at the city, then followed her down the hall. The War Council was held in a large room that had once been a theater. Now it was filled with communication equipment and maps showing the current state of the war. Representatives from every major resistance group were present, either in person or through video links. Sarah Chen was there, still leading the team that operated the Devourer. Victor sat beside her, now the fleet commander of a small squadron of ships they had captured or built over the past 2 years. Alexei was there too, walking now with a prosthetic leg that he had designed himself. He had become the Resistance's chief strategist, planning operations across the entire planet. And there were others, hundreds of people who had risen from nothing to become leaders of humanity's fight for survival. Marcus took his place at the head of the table. "What's our status?" Alexei brought up a global map. "We control the Americas except for a few Vexari strongholds. Europe is about 60% liberated. Asia and Africa are more contested, but we're gaining ground every week. Australia has been fully free for 8 months. And the enemy? Their numbers are down significantly. They've lost ships, soldiers, and equipment faster than they can replace them. Our intelligence suggests they're debating whether to send more reinforcements or cut their losses." Marcus nodded. This was the crucial moment. If the Vexari decided to escalate, they could still make the war much worse. But if they were losing faith in their ability to win, there might be another option. "What about our other project?" he asked. Sarah answered. "We've completed analysis of all the Vexari data we've captured. We know the locations of their home world and their other conquered planets. More importantly, we've found something else." She brought up a document on the main screen. It was in the Vexari language, but a translation appeared beside it. "This is a message from something called the Galactic Council. It seems the Vexari are part of a larger community of spacefaring species, and that community has rules about how invasions can be conducted." Marcus leaned forward. "What kind of rules?" "It appears that conquering primitive species is allowed, but only if they don't resist. If a species fights back successfully for a certain period, they gain the right to petition the Council for recognition as a sovereign world." The room was silent as the implications sank in. "How long do they have to resist?" Alina asked. 3 of their standard years, which is about 2.5 Earth years. Marcus did the math. "That means we're almost there." "Exactly. If we can keep fighting for another 4 months, we can petition the Galactic Council, and if they recognize us, the Vexari would be forced to withdraw under galactic law." It seemed almost too good to be true. "Can we trust this information?" "We've verified it through multiple sources. The Galactic Council is real, and so are these rules. The Vexari never expected any species to resist long enough to invoke them." Marcus looked around the table. He saw hope in every face, but also caution. They had learned not to rely on outside help. "Here's how I see it," he said. "We plan as if this council doesn't exist. We keep fighting, keep liberating territory, keep hurting the enemy. If the petition works, great. If it doesn't, we win anyway. But we don't stop fighting." Everyone agreed. They were not going to put their fate in anyone else's hands. The next 4 months were the hardest of the entire war. The Vexari, somehow aware that time was running out, launched a massive offensive. They committed everything they had to breaking the resistance before the deadline arrived. Marcus led the defense from the front, as he always had. At 65, he should have been commanding from a bunker somewhere safe. Instead, he was in the trenches with his soldiers, fighting beside them as the enemy threw wave after wave against their positions. Alina commanded the eastern front. Thomas held the north. Maria, who had finally stopped healing wounds to start causing them, led a guerrilla unit that struck at enemy supply lines. The Devourer and its sister ships fought constantly, preventing the Vexari from achieving space superiority. Victor was in the pilot's seat for every major battle, his mind merged with his ship until he couldn't tell where he ended and it began. Casualties mounted on both sides. For every position the resistance lost, they took another somewhere else. The Vexari were winning some battles but losing the war of attrition. 1 week before the deadline, the Vexari launched their final push. They concentrated their remaining forces for an attack on the resistance headquarters, hopping to kill the human leaders and break the movement's spirit. Marcus knew they were coming. He had prepared for this moment. "Let them come," he told his commanders. "We'll make our stand here." The battle lasted 3 days. The Vexari attacked from all directions, using their remaining air power to pound the human defenses. The resistance fought back with everything they had, holding the line through sheer determination. On the second day, Admiral Zorax himself came down from orbit to lead the assault. He was desperate now, knowing that his career and possibly his life depended on victory. He pushed his troops forward regardless of casualties. On the third day, the Vexari broke through the outer defenses. They pushed into the city, fighting from building to building, street to street. Marcus was in the thick of it, his rifle never cool. By afternoon, the situation was critical. The Vexari had reached the headquarters building. Marcus and his surviving defenders had retreated to the upper floors, making a last stand. "This is it," Alina said, reloading her weapon. "Whatever happens, I want you to know it's been an honor." Marcus looked at her. The scared university student he had met 3 years ago was gone. In her place was a warrior, a leader, a symbol of everything humanity could be. "The honor is mine," he said. "Now let's show them how humans die." The Vexari burst through the doors. Marcus fired, taking down the first wave. Alina fired beside him. Thomas, badly wounded but still fighting, held the other entrance. Admiral Zorax pushed forward, leading his soldiers personally. He had Marcus in his sights. "This ends now, human," he said. "Yes," Marcus replied, "it does." He raised his rifle for one last shot. And then the sky opened up. Ships descended through the clouds, but not Vexari ships. These were different, strange designs in dozens of different styles. Weapons fire rained down on the Vexari positions, cutting through their forces like a scythe through wheat. A voice boomed from speakers on the lead ship, translated into every language on Earth. "This is the Galactic Council Peacekeeping Force. The species known as humanity has successfully resisted conquest for the required period. This world is now recognized as sovereign. All Vexari forces are ordered to withdraw immediately." Marcus lowered his rifle. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In front of him, Admiral Zorax stood frozen. His soldiers looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. The council had spoken. The invasion was over. "You," Zorax said to Marcus, his voice filled with a mix of hatred and something that might have been respect. "You did this. One old man, and you did this." Marcus shook his head. "Not one man, millions. Every human who fought, who refused to give up, who chose to resist, that's who did this." The Vexari withdrawal began that day. Ships rose from the surface carrying soldiers who had been so confident of victory 3 years ago. They left behind the wreckage of their invasion, destroyed cities, scarred landscapes, millions of graves. But they also left behind something else, a humanity that would never be conquered again. 1 month after the withdrawal, Marcus Cole stood before a crowd of 50,000 people in what had been the Resistance headquarters. It was now the capital of the new United Earth government. Alina was there, and Thomas, and Maria. Alexei stood proudly on his prosthetic leg. Victor had landed the Devourer in the city square so everyone could see the ship that had changed the war. And there were others, thousands of fighters who had come from all over the world for this moment. They had won. Against all odds, they had won. Marcus looked at them all, and he thought about the journey that had brought them here. It started with 12 defenders at a small outpost, refusing to surrender when surrender would have been the sensible choice. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, the Vexari came to our world. They thought we would be easy to conquer. They were wrong. A cheer rose from the crowd. They underestimated us because they didn't understand what humans are made of. They saw a primitive species with inferior technology. What they didn't see was the fire inside us, the stubbornness, the refusal to accept defeat. He paused, remembering all the people who hadn't lived to see this day. All the soldiers who fell at Outpost 7 and 1,000 other battles. All the civilians who died in the initial invasion. All the friends he had lost along the way. We won this war because we believed in each other. We won because when one person fell, another stepped forward to take their place. We won because we never gave up. Alina stepped forward and handed him something. It was the old rifle he had carried at Outpost 7, the same one he had fired when 12 stood against 300. "This rifle," Marcus said, holding it up, "fired the first shots of our resistance. It's not special. It's just an old weapon from an old soldier, but it represents something special. It represents the choice we made to fight back." He placed the rifle on a pedestal that had been prepared for it. From now on, this will stand here as a reminder that no matter how dark things seem, no matter how impossible the odds, we can fight. We can win. Because we're human, and that's what we do. The crowd erupted in cheers that lasted for 10 minutes. Later that evening, Marcus found a quiet spot on a balcony overlooking the city. The celebrations were continuing below, but he needed a moment alone. Alina found him there, as she often did. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about the future. The Vexari are gone, but the galaxy knows about us now. There will be other challenges, other threats. And we'll face them, together." "Yes," Marcus smiled, "that's what we do." He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Galactic Council, and beyond that, countless other species. Earth was no longer isolated. Humanity had taken its first steps onto a larger stage. It was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. But Marcus wasn't worried. He had seen what humanity could do when they stood together. He had seen ordinary people become heroes. He had seen hope triumph over despair. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced the Vexari, with courage, with determination, and with the unshakable belief that nothing was impossible. The war was over, but the story of humanity was just beginning. And Marcus Cole, the veteran who held the last outpost, would be there to see it unfold. He had earned that much.